A unique phenomenon emerged through the Dutch Renaissance during the 1400s, with their fabrics from England and silks from Venice and pigments from the Middle East. They created a mercantile mix that would have huge influence, giving rise, for example, to an exciting use of these new pigments in oils and a technique of layering translucent paint, giving the ability to render everything with fantastic clarity. This produced a marvellous advert for the products on display, the backdrop in context with the people wearing the fabrics. And so, as the ports of the Low Countries became the go-to market hubs of Europe, with goods arriving straight off the ship and unloading bays directly into the marketplace, commissions of traditional religious paintings took on a different style. Instead of the usual forward-facing pose, a slight turn of the head could enable a clever depiction of any donor's recognisable profile. Yet these were still painted within the traditional style used to depict saints. Another example in style change would be a cushion or similar overlapping the edge of an inner painted frame, giving the viewer a sense that the heavenly being within that frame was indeed reaching into your earthly space. This style of painting enthralled the Italians and captivated many Italian Renaissance painters, who then added their own flourishes, and as oil too was a boon for the Venetians, whose climate was unsuitable for the long-held traditional technique of Rome's airy fresco paintings. This opened up new areas for northern Italian painting. But this era of the seafaring Dutch Golden Age heralded financial excess, which manifested itself in the tulip bubble crash, one of the first speculative crashes focused on the exotic but humble tulip. The Enlightenment had its roots in a unique combination of art and science, in turn bound up in an uneasy association with religious and spiritual beliefs. Galileo Galilei, whose groundbreaking efforts in studying the heavens caused a divisive rift with himself and the Catholic Church in 1633, and, held by the Inquisition, which accused him of heresy, caused him to be locked up until his death. Historically, science and religious beliefs had always been at odds, from Plato, the Greeks through the Romans, Byzantium and the Islamic Golden Age, all having differing opinions, areas of overlap and of continuity. But the main basis for divisions was that science demanded empirically based evidence and religion did not. Sir John Ruskin, 1819 to 1900, was a professor at Slade School of Art and also an art critic and philanthropist of the time. Deeply religious, yet as an enlightened thinker, he found himself questioning that belief. He was enamoured with Turner and wrote in favour of him, although again he questioned deeply the effects of the new dehumanising industrial force that was sweeping the globe. He greatly favoured the Pre-Raphaelites, as he did also a fervent follower of Karl Marx, William Morris. William Morris believed so strongly that the mechanical-like change in the quality of everyday life was, as Marx had pointed out, not a change for mankind's good, only a change for the few who reaped the rewards of mass labour, those in labour to create with repetitive motion as though suffering a palsy, this process feeding on itself to create yet more wealth for the elite. The West and East India Companies, but specifically the Dutch West India Company, with its counterpart the British East India Company, could be seen as the main culprits. The Atlantic slave trade being the most stark reminder of this entitlement, borne out by every vessel and trader who had vested interest. That and the opium trade, heralded by the East India Company during the height of the Qing dynasty in China. Unarguably, these the ugliest faces of this trade, in their greed and propensity to destroy centuries of development and culture in the wake of absolute arrogance. Yet, right up to recently, European art has rarely shown this face. However, while the wealthy were enjoying long breaks travelling around Europe, soaking up the somewhat abstracted exotic tales and trinkets on display from all this discovery, the less mobile were also to suddenly have a jolt with that of the train. Although rail had been around assisting the transport of coal and minerals, this wasn't to emerge as realistic human transport until the 1830s. Crucially, it coincided with advances in science during the Enlightenment years, culminating in a group of advances in steam with the engine, chemicals and manufacturing processes. Kick-started in Britain and followed up in Europe, taking itself quickly across to Japan, the Americas and pretty much everywhere a ship had touched port. Steam now fueled cross-country travel like never before. So too, a new shift was unfolding away from agriculture and handcrafted goods to intensive farming and mechanised products. All this mechanised industry clustered around metropolises, which had also to house the new influx of workers. The previous wars, up until the 1830s, had left a large dent in many European countries' coffers, and so the populace was ready and desperate to pick up sticks and move away from community of old to relocate. This phenomena was to radically change how power, reform and especially movement and control of people were to be dealt with, and the emergence of a middle class thriving on this industry were now ready and able to dictate the shots. The art, born on all the philosophical, scientific and social thinking surrounding this massive shift, couldn't help but change with it. A mix of new thinking, not only in science but politics, was to shape this change, Karl Marx being one of many. On the one hand, you had philosophical thinking taking on the meaning of God in society with thinkers like Nietzsche, and a new way of seeing the workings of the human brain with psychoanalysts like Freud. Nietzsche saw God as redundant, a useful way of keeping many believers hooked on a deity with which they could hang all their earthly woes. Instead, he saw humans as being in control of their own individual destiny, to strive for the best in oneself. Freud began to see a direct connection between the way we acted and our subconscious mind, our past childhood being a source of future interpretations of our thoughts, feelings and actions. But Marx was the main political thinker. You could say he altered how one French artist initially saw revolutionary Paris of 1850. Courbet was an artist, but one who flew close to the political flame, and therefore his art was to influence many more and in different ways. Marx, part of whose basic premise was concerned with profit, had applied his thinking to art and artists as well. He noted, as it was not born of material use and so did not arise out of a human necessity. This grounded his idea that as human beings we are all relative in the support of a collective society carried on through the generations, the people having specific and interconnected needs in their social endeavours to survive and evolve, rather than the top-down structure of owner-worker, of surplus profit, the exploitative method. He did recognise, though, art's potential, drawn from other philosophical thinkers, that it produced a thought, and therefore it could communicate or advance that thought for social discourse and benefit. The idea that art could help change things did not truly take hold until the more radical, directly politicised artists of the 1960s, and even that was fragmented, as the art then was born out of driven ideological purpose rather than a questioning of ideas, and so there became two camps in contemporary art during that time concerning what were pure artistic origins within its own production.